It was one of those days where everything seemed to go wrong. The rain had been pouring relentlessly since morning, turning the streets into slippery rivers and filling the air with a damp chill. Clara adjusted her apron as she rushed between tables at Joe's diner, balancing trays laden with steaming plates of food. At just 24 years old, she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. After losing both her parents in a car accident 2 years ago, she became the sole caregiver for her 12-year-old brother, Ben. Juggling 2 jobs while trying to keep their small apartment livable was no easy feat, but Clara never complained. She was determined to give Ben the best life possible, even if it meant sacrificing her own dreams. The diner buzzed with customers seeking refuge from the storm, and Clara worked nonstop, refilling coffee cups, taking orders, and offering warm smiles despite her exhaustion. By the time her shift ended late that evening, every muscle in her body ached, and her feet felt like they were made of lead. All she wanted was to collapse into bed, but first, she needed to pick up groceries for dinner and make sure Ben had finished his homework. Life didn't stop just because she was tired. As she stepped outside, pulling her hood over her head to shield herself from the rain, Clara squinted through the downpour toward the parking lot. Her old sedan was parked near the edge, its faded, paint and dented bumper standing out among the newer vehicles. Or so she thought. In the dim light of the flickering street lamp, all the cars looked eerily similar, dark shapes blurred by sheets of rain. Shivering and eager to escape the cold, Clara hurried toward what she assumed was her car, fumbling with her keys as she approached. She unlocked the door without much thought and slid into the back seat, too tired to notice anything unusual. It wasn't until she settled in, leaning her head against the leather seat, that something felt off. The interior smelled faintly of expensive cologne, not the musty odor of her worn-out upholstery. And the seats. These weren't the cracked, vinyl ones she was used to. They were smooth, luxurious, and far more comfortable than anything Clara had ever sat on. Before she could fully process this realization, the driver's side door opened, startling her awake. A tall man climbed in, his sharp features illuminated briefly by the glow of the overhead light. He froze when he saw her sitting there, wide-eyed and confused. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, the man's voice broke the silence, low and clipped with irritation. "What are you doing in my car?" Clara's heart raced as she scrambled to explain. I'm so sorry. I thought this was my car. I didn't mean to. I'll leave right now." She reached for the handle, ready to bolt out into the rain, but the man stopped her with a raised hand. "Wait," he said, studying her face. His tone softened slightly, though he still looked skeptical. "You're soaking wet. How did you mistake my car for yours?" Clara hesitated, embarrassed. "It's dark, and it's raining so hard. I guess I wasn't paying attention. I work here." She gestured vaguely toward the diner, "and I'm just really tired." The man sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. Up close, Clara noticed the fine lines etched around his eyes and the shadow of stubble on his jaw. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't quite place it. "Do you need a ride home?" he asked abruptly, surprising both of them with the offer. "Oh no, I couldn't ask you to do that," Clara stammered, shaking her head. "I'll call a cab or something." "It's late, and it's pouring," the man countered. "Besides, I already know where you live." When Clara's eyes widened in alarm, he quickly added, "Not like that. You mentioned working here, and I've seen your car before. It's the blue one with the dent in the bumper, right?" Reluctantly, Clara nodded. She didn't have the energy to argue, and truthfully, the idea of not having to wait in the rain for a ride sounded appealing. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this stranger than met the eye. Something about the way he carried himself, his tailored suit, his polished shoes, suggested wealth and power. Yet, there was also a sadness in his gaze, a heaviness that hinted at a story untold. The drive to Clara's apartment was quiet, save for the rhythmic patter of rain against the windshield. She stared out the window, watching the blurry lights of the town pass by, while the man focused intently on the road. Finally, unable to contain her curiosity any longer, Clara ventured a question. "If you don't mind me asking, who are you? I feel like I should know." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost forming a smile. "Ethan Caldwell," he replied simply, as if the name should mean something to her. And then it clicked. Ethan Caldwell, the reclusive millionaire who had once been the talk of the town after building a tech empire practically overnight. Stories of his lavish lifestyle and mysterious disappearance from public view had circulated for years, fueling endless speculation. But none of those stories prepared Clara for the man sitting beside her now, quiet, contemplative, and oddly kind. When they arrived at her building, Ethan insisted on walking her to the door, despite her protests. As they climbed the creaky stairs to her second-floor apartment, Clara couldn't help but feel self-conscious. The peeling wallpaper and scuffed floorboards seemed especially shabby compared to the luxury of his car. Inside, the cramped space was cluttered but cozy, with mismatched furniture and stacks of books piled haphazardly on every available surface. Ben was asleep on the couch, his school books spread open across the coffee table. Ethan lingered awkwardly in the doorway, taking in the scene before him. "This is your life," he murmured, more to himself than to Clara. There was no judgment in his voice, only a strange sort of wonder. Before she could respond, he turned to leave, pausing only to say, "Thank you for trusting me tonight. Maybe we'll meet again." Clara watched him go, unsure of what to think. That brief encounter left her with more questions than answers. Who was Ethan Caldwell, really? Why had he gone out of his way to help her? And most importantly, why did she feel like this chance meeting might be the start of something extraordinary? The next morning, Clara woke up with the memory of the previous night still lingering in her mind. She replayed every detail: the rain, the wrong car, Ethan Caldwell's unexpected kindness, and couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual was brewing. It wasn't every day you accidentally invaded the personal space of a millionaire and lived to tell the tale. As she prepared breakfast for Ben, her thoughts kept drifting back to Ethan. Who was he, really? Sure, everyone in town knew his name, but no one truly knew him. He had always been more of a legend than a person, an enigmatic figure who had risen to fame and fortune, only to retreat into solitude. Clara tried to push the encounter out of her head as she went about her routine. Life didn't give her much room for distractions. Between juggling shifts at the diner and picking up extra hours cleaning offices downtown, her days were packed to the brim. Still, there was something about Ethan's presence that stuck with her. His quiet demeanor, the way he seemed both powerful and vulnerable at the same time, it puzzled her. And then there was the way he'd looked around her apartment, not with disdain, but with curiosity. Like he was trying to piece together a puzzle. A few days passed, and just when Clara thought the incident would fade into the background of her busy life, Ethan reappeared. This time it wasn't by accident. Late one afternoon, as Clara was wiping down tables after the lunch rush, the bell above the diner door chimed. She glanced up and froze. There he was, walking through the door like any other customer, except nothing about him blended in. His tailored coat and polished shoes stood out sharply against the faded booths and cracked linoleum floors of Joe's diner. Clara felt her cheeks flush as she approached his table. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, forcing a polite smile. "What brings you here?" Ethan gave her a faint smile in return. "Just passing through," he replied casually, though his eyes betrayed a deeper purpose. "Mind if I sit for a bit?" "Of course not," Clara stammered, gesturing toward the menu. "Can I get you anything?" He skimmed the laminated pages briefly before ordering a cup of coffee. While Clara busied herself filling his order, Ethan observed the hustle and bustle of the diner. He watched the regulars chatting over greasy burgers, the tired waitresses weaving between tables, and the cook shouting orders from the kitchen. To him, this world felt foreign yet strangely comforting, a stark contrast to the sterile opulence of his gated estate. When Clara returned with his coffee, Ethan motioned for her to sit across from him. She hesitated, glancing around to make sure none of the other customers needed her attention. Finally, she slid into the booth, folding her hands nervously in her lap. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Ethan stirred his coffee slowly, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about what happened the other night," he began. "About how we met." Clara's stomach tightened. Was he upset? Had she unknowingly crossed some invisible line? Before she could apologize, Ethan continued. "You work hard, Clara. Anyone can see that. But you shouldn't have to struggle like this." Her brows furrowed. "Struggle is part of life," she said, simply. "Everyone has their battles." "Yes, but yours seem heavier than most," Ethan countered gently. "You're taking care of your brother, working 2 jobs, barely keeping your head above water. That's admirable, but it's also exhausting. You deserve better." Clara opened her mouth to protest, but Ethan held up a hand to stop her. "Hear me out. I'm not saying this out of pity. I've seen people fight for scraps while others waste fortunes without a second thought. It frustrates me. I want to help." "Help?" Clara echoed, her voice tinged with skepticism. "How exactly do you plan to do that?" Ethan leaned forward, slightly, his tone serious. "I need someone to assist me with organizing my schedule, managing correspondence, and handling a few personal tasks. It's nothing glamorous, but it pays well and it comes with flexibility. I think you'd be perfect for the job." Clara stared at him, stunned. The offer sounded too good to be true. A steady paycheck, flexible hours, and the chance to step away from the endless grind of minimum wage jobs. It was tempting, but doubt gnawed at her. Why would someone like Ethan Caldwell choose her for such a role? What did he expect in return? "I don't know," she murmured, fidgeting with the hem of her apron. "I'm not exactly qualified for something like that." "You underestimate yourself," Ethan said firmly. "From what I've seen, you're capable, resourceful, and trustworthy. Those are qualities I value far more than a fancy resume." His confidence in her caught Clara off guard. No one had ever spoken to her like that, like she was worth investing in. Still, she hesitated. Accepting his offer meant stepping into a world she didn't understand, a world where she might feel even more out of place than she already did. "What's the catch?" she asked, finally narrowing her eyes. "There's always a catch," Ethan chuckled softly. "No catch, just an opportunity. For both of us. I could use someone reliable in my corner, and you could use a break from all this." He gestured vaguely to the chaos of the diner. "Think about it. If you say no, I won't hold it against you. But if you say yes, I promise you won't regret it." Clara spent the rest of the day weighing the decision. On one hand, the idea of working for Ethan felt daunting. He was a stranger, albeit a kind one, and his wealth and influence made him seem untouchable. On the other hand, the prospect of stability, a real chance to breathe for once, was impossible to ignore. For Ben's sake, she owed it to herself to consider it. That evening, after tucking Ben into bed, Clara sat at the kitchen table with a pen and paper, jotting down pros and cons. The list was short, but the conclusion was clear. She needed to take the risk. The next morning, she called Ethan and accepted his offer. Their first official meeting took place in Ethan's sprawling estate, a mansion perched on a hill overlooking the town. Clara arrived early, her nerves buzzing as she stepped inside. The interior was breathtaking. High ceilings, marble floors, and walls adorned with art that probably cost more than her entire apartment. Yet despite its grandeur, the house felt empty, almost hollow, as if it lacked the warmth of a home. Ethan greeted her warmly, showing her to a cozy office tucked away on the 2nd floor. "This will be your workspace," he explained, gesturing to a desk stocked with supplies and a state-of-the-art computer. "I'll walk you through everything today, but don't hesitate to ask questions if you're unsure about anything." Over the next few hours, Ethan outlined his expectations and introduced her to the various responsibilities of the role. Clara listened intently, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions. Despite her initial apprehension, she found herself relaxing under Ethan's guidance. He wasn't intimidating or condescending. Instead, he treated her as an equal, valuing her input and trusting her judgment. As the days turned into weeks, Clara settled into her new routine. She quickly discovered that Ethan's life was far more complicated than she had imagined. In addition to managing his business affairs, she learned about the scandals that had driven him into isolation, the accusations of unethical practices, the lawsuits, the media frenzy that had tarnished his reputation. Though Ethan rarely spoke about it, Clara could sense the weight of his past hanging over him like a shadow. Despite his flaws, however, Clara couldn't deny the goodness within him. He often surprised her with small acts of kindness, paying off her overdue bills, arranging tutoring for Ben, or simply listening when she needed to vent. Slowly but surely, their professional relationship blossomed into a genuine friendship. For the first time in years, Clara felt hopeful, not just for herself, but for Ethan too. Unbeknownst to either of them, this partnership would become the catalyst for profound change, not only in their individual lives, but in the lives of those around them. As the weeks turned into months, Clara became an indispensable part of Ethan's life. What had started as a simple job managing his schedule and correspondence evolved into something much deeper. She wasn't just organizing meetings or sorting emails. She was helping him navigate the complexities of his world, a world that often felt overwhelming even to him. At first, Ethan kept her at arm's length, treating their interactions with polite professionalism. But as time went on, he began to let his guard down, revealing glimpses of the man behind the polished exterior. Clara noticed little things about him, how he always arrived early to appointments but lingered afterward, lost in thought, how he avoided talking about certain topics, especially anything related to his past, how he carried himself with quiet confidence, yet seemed perpetually weighed down by some invisible burden. It intrigued her. She wanted to understand him, not because it was part of her job, but because she genuinely cared. One afternoon, while going over Ethan's calendar, Clara stumbled upon an entry labeled therapy session. Curious, she asked if there was anything specific she needed to prepare for it. Ethan hesitated before answering. "It's personal," he said finally. "But since you're handling my schedule now, I suppose you'll find out eventually." He explained that he'd been seeing a therapist regularly for the past year, though reluctantly. The sessions were meant to help him process the fallout from the scandals that had nearly destroyed his career, the lawsuits, the betrayals, the public humiliation. "I don't like revisiting those memories," Ethan admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. "But my lawyer insists it's necessary if I want to rebuild my reputation." Clara listened intently, sensing the vulnerability beneath his words. Without thinking, she blurted out, "Why don't you tell people the truth about what really happened?" Ethan raised an eyebrow, surprised by her boldness. "The truth doesn't matter when everyone has already made up their minds," he replied bitterly. "Besides, I'm not innocent. I made mistakes, big ones, and I have to live with that." His honesty caught Clara off guard. She realized then that Ethan wasn't the cold, calculating businessman the media had painted him to be. He was human, flawed, and struggling to make amends. This revelation sparked a new determination within her. If anyone could help him confront his demons, it was her. Over the next few weeks, Clara found subtle ways to encourage Ethan to open up. Sometimes it was through casual conversations during breaks, asking gentle questions about his childhood or his passions outside of work. Other times it was by sharing pieces of her own story, how losing her parents had forced her to grow up too quickly, how she'd learned to find strength in adversity. Slowly, Ethan began to trust her enough to share more of himself. One evening, as they worked late in his office, Ethan pulled out an old photo album. The leather cover was worn, its edges frayed from years of use. He flipped through the pages silently, stopping occasionally to trace a finger over faded images. Clara leaned closer, curious. The photos depicted a younger Ethan, smiling, carefree, surrounded by friends and family. There were pictures of him graduating from college, celebrating holidays, and working long hours at the startup that would eventually become his empire. "This was before everything changed," Ethan said softly. "Before I let ambition cloud my judgment. Back then I thought success was the only thing that mattered. I didn't realize how much I was sacrificing along the way." Clara studied his face, noting the sadness etched into his features. "You can't change the past," she said gently, "but you can decide what kind of future you want. Maybe it's not too late to fix things, to reconnect with the people you hurt." Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and doubt. "Do you really believe that?" he asked. "I do," Clara replied firmly. "People aren't defined by their worst moments. They're defined by how they choose to move forward." Her words stayed with him long after she left for the night. For the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself to imagine a different path, one where he faced his mistakes head-on instead of hiding from them. Inspired by Clara's encouragement, he decided to take the first step toward redemption. The following week, Ethan reached out to several former colleagues and business partners whom he had wronged during his rise to power. Each conversation was difficult, dredging up painful memories and forcing him to confront the consequences of his actions. Some refused to speak to him, their anger still raw after all these years. Others listened reluctantly, skeptical of his intentions. But a few, those who had known him before the scandals, took pity on him and agreed to meet. Clara accompanied Ethan to these meetings, offering moral support and ensuring he stayed focused on his goal. She watched as he apologized sincerely, acknowledging his role in their suffering and promising to make amends. Though the process was slow and emotionally draining, Ethan felt a sense of relief each time someone accepted his apology. It was as if a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying began to lift. One particularly memorable meeting took place with Sarah, a former employee who had been fired unjustly during one of Ethan's cost-cutting measures. Her dismissal had devastated her financially, leaving her unable to provide for her young children. When Ethan showed up at her doorstep, she greeted him with tears in her eyes, not of forgiveness, but of anger and pain. "I don't know why you're here," Sarah said bitterly. "What could you possibly say to make this right?" Ethan swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he spoke. "You're right. I can't undo what I did. But I can try to help you now. Please let me make things better." To his surprise, Sarah agreed to hear him out. Over coffee, they discussed ways he could assist her, from clearing her debts to funding her dream of starting a small business. By the end of their conversation, Sarah's expression had softened, though her trust remained fragile. Still, it was progress. And for Ethan, that was enough. As Ethan worked to repair his relationships, Clara continued to push him to think beyond himself. One day, while brainstorming ideas for a charity event, she suggested something bolder: creating a foundation dedicated to supporting struggling families in the community. "Think about it," she said excitedly. "You have the resources to make a real difference. Why not use them to help people like me, people who are just trying to get by?" Ethan was hesitant at first, worried about being accused of using charity as a PR stunt. But Clara convinced him that genuine intentions would shine through if he approached the project with sincerity. Together, they drafted a plan for the foundation, focusing on providing financial assistance, educational opportunities, and mentorship programs for low-income families. Launching the foundation required countless hours of planning and coordination, but Ethan threw himself into the work with renewed purpose. For the first time in years, he felt like he was contributing something meaningful to the world. And Clara? She stood by his side every step of the way, cheering him on and reminding him of the impact they were making. Through it all, their bond grew stronger. Ethan admired Clara's resilience and optimism, qualities that inspired him to keep pushing forward despite the challenges. In turn, Clara appreciated Ethan's willingness to change, to face his fears and strive for a better version of himself. They complemented each other perfectly, balancing strengths and weaknesses in ways neither had anticipated. Yet, amidst the professional successes and personal growth, there was an unspoken tension between them, a spark that neither dared to acknowledge. Both knew their relationship had shifted from employer-employee to something deeper, but neither was ready to address it. Instead, they focused on the tasks at hand, letting their connection simmer quietly beneath the surface. Little did they know the journey ahead would test them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But for now, they were content to walk it together, side by side, building a brighter future not just for themselves, but for everyone whose lives they touched. The foundation that Ethan and Clara had poured their hearts into was finally ready to launch. It was called New Beginnings, a name Clara had suggested after weeks of brainstorming. To her, it symbolized hope, a chance for people to start over, just as Ethan had done in his own life. The night before the official unveiling, Ethan hosted a small gathering at his estate to thank the team of volunteers, donors, and community leaders who had helped bring the foundation to life. Clara worked tirelessly to ensure every detail was perfect, from the elegant decor to the heartfelt speeches prepared for the occasion. As guests mingled in the grand ballroom, sipping champagne and admiring the displays showcasing the foundation's mission, Clara stood near the entrance watching everything unfold. She felt a mix of pride and disbelief. A year ago, she'd been serving coffee and greasy burgers at Joe's Diner, barely scraping by. Now she was standing in a mansion, surrounded by influential people who were genuinely excited about making a difference. And none of it would have happened without Ethan. Speaking of Ethan, he was across the room, deep in conversation with a local journalist. He looked confident, charismatic even, as he explained the foundation's goals and shared stories of families they hoped to assist. But Clara noticed something else too, a softness in his expression, a warmth that hadn't been there when they first met. It was clear that running the foundation wasn't just about rebuilding his reputation, it was about finding purpose again. When the event came to an end, Ethan walked over to Clara, his face glowing with gratitude. "You did amazing tonight," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Clara smiled, brushing off the compliment. "It's not about me. This is your vision, I'm just helping you make it happen." Ethan shook his head. "No, it's ours. You've been the driving force behind all of this, the one pushing me to be better, to think bigger. I owe you more than I can ever repay." His words sent a flutter through Clara's chest, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. They weren't supposed to cross that line. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Instead, she changed the subject, asking about plans for the next phase of the foundation's rollout. Ethan obliged, diving into logistics, but the moment lingered between them, unspoken yet undeniable. Over the following months, New Beginnings gained momentum. Families received scholarships, single parents found stable housing, and children attended after-school programs designed to nurture their talents. The positive impact rippled through the community, earning the foundation widespread acclaim. For Ethan, it was a chance to rewrite his legacy, not as a ruthless businessman, but as someone who cared deeply about giving back. But while the foundation thrived, Clara's personal life began to shift as well. With Ethan covering her tuition and encouraging her to pursue her dreams, she enrolled in night classes at the local community college. Her goal was simple: become a nurse so she could help others the way Ethan had helped her. Balancing work, school, and caring for Ben wasn't easy, but Clara refused to give up. Every late-night study session, every exhausting exam, brought her closer to achieving something she never thought possible. One evening, after a particularly grueling anatomy test, Clara returned home to find a note on her kitchen table. It was, from Ethan, written in his neat handwriting, "Proud of you. Keep going." Beneath the message was a gift card to her favorite bookstore. Tears welled up in her eyes as she read it. How did he always know exactly what she needed? Despite their growing closeness, both Ethan and Clara remained cautious about letting their relationship evolve beyond friendship. There were moments, fleeting glances, lingering touches that hinted at deeper feelings, but neither dared to act on them. They were too different, too aware of the potential complications. What if admitting their emotions ruined the incredible partnership they'd built? What if it changed everything? Still, the tension simmered beneath the surface, especially during quiet evenings spent working together in Ethan's office. One such evening, as they reviewed grant applications for the foundation, Clara suddenly asked, "Do you ever think about starting over completely? Like leaving all of this behind and just disappearing?" Ethan paused, setting down his pen. "What do you mean?" he asked, his tone curious. "I don't know," Clara admitted, staring out the window at the darkened hills beyond. Sometimes it feels like no matter how hard we try, the past is always chasing us, like we're stuck carrying around these invisible weights. Wouldn't it be nice to just walk away and start fresh somewhere else? Ethan leaned back in his chair, considering her words. I used to dream about that, he confessed. After everything fell apart, I wanted nothing more than to leave it all behind. But running away doesn't solve anything. Trust me, I've tried. The only way to truly move forward is to face what's holding you back. Clara turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. And have you? Faced it, I mean? He hesitated before nodding slowly. Mostly. It's not easy, and I still have a long way to go. But having you here has made it easier. You remind me that I'm capable of being better. Her heart skipped a beat at his confession, but she forced herself to focus on the task at hand. Well, let's finish these applications, she said lightly, masking her emotions. We'll worry about existential crises another time. Ethan chuckled, though his gaze lingered on her longer than necessary. The moment passed, but the undercurrent of unspoken feelings remained. Meanwhile, outside their bubble of progress and redemption, storm clouds were gathering. Not everyone was pleased with Ethan's transformation or the success of new beginnings. One afternoon, as Clara sorted through mail in the office, she came across a letter addressed to Ethan. It was marked urgent and bore the logo of a law firm. Curious, she handed it to him without opening it. Ethan scanned the contents, his expression darkening with each passing second. When he finally looked up, his jaw was clenched tightly. It's a lawsuit, he said grimly. From Greg Hargrove. Clara frowned, trying to place the name. Who's that? A former business partner, Ethan explained, his voice heavy with frustration. We parted ways years ago under messy circumstances. Apparently, he's decided to dredge up old accusations, claiming I embezzled funds during our partnership. That's ridiculous, Clara exclaimed. You've changed so much since then, can't you prove it's false? It's complicated, Ethan replied, rubbing his temples. There's evidence that could paint me in a bad light, even if the truth is on my side. This could ruin everything we've worked for, the foundation, my reputation. Seeing the fear in his eyes, Clara reached out instinctively, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. We'll figure it out, she said firmly. Together. For the first time since reading the letter, Ethan allowed himself to feel a flicker of hope. Clara had always been his anchor, the one person who believed in him even when he didn't believe in himself. If anyone could help him weather this storm, it was her. As the legal battle loomed ahead, Ethan and Clara threw themselves into preparing for the worst. They hired a top-notch attorney, gathered documents, and strategized ways to counter Greg's claims. It was exhausting and emotionally draining, but they refused to give up. Through it all, their bond grew stronger, forged in the fire of adversity. One night, after hours of poring over paperwork, Clara collapsed onto the couch in Ethan's study, rubbing her temples. If we survive this, she muttered, half joking, we should write a book. How to survive scandals, lawsuits, and redemption arcs. Ethan laughed despite himself, sitting beside her. You'd be the hero of the story, he said, softly. Without you, I wouldn't have made it this far. Clara glanced at him, her heart pounding. For a moment, it felt like the walls they'd built around their feelings might crumble. But instead of saying anything, she simply smiled and leaned her head against his shoulder. In that quiet moment, they both knew, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The lawsuit filed by Greg Hargrove sent shockwaves through Ethan's life, threatening to undo all the progress he had made. The media frenzy that followed was relentless, with headlines painting him as a villain once again. Millionaire faces. New allegations of fraud, screamed one tabloid. Ethan Caldwell's past catches up to him, declared another. It was as if the world had forgotten, or perhaps never cared, about the man he had become. For Clara, watching the backlash unfold was heartbreaking. She saw how the accusations weighed on Ethan, dragging him back into the darkness he had worked so hard to escape. Every morning she arrived at his estate to find him sitting in his study, staring blankly at stacks of legal documents and news clippings. His usual confidence was replaced by self-doubt, his optimism clouded by fear. But instead of letting him spiral, Clara refused to let him face this alone. "Hey," she said gently one morning, stepping into the room with 2 cups of coffee. "You look like you haven't slept." Ethan glanced up, forcing a weak smile. "I haven't," he admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see those headlines. Hear the voices calling me a fraud. Maybe they're right." "They're not." Clara shot back firmly, setting the coffee down in front of him. "Greg is trying to tear you down because he's bitter about the past. That doesn't make him right, and it sure doesn't mean you deserve this." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "It's not just about Greg. This case is dredging up everything I've tried to leave behind. The mistakes, the betrayals, the people I hurt. What if everyone realizes I'm not the changed man I claim to be?" Clara knelt beside his chair, looking him straight in the eye. "You are a changed man, Ethan. I know it. And anyone who truly knows you knows it too. Yes, you made mistakes, but you've spent the last year proving you're better than your past. Don't let Greg take that away from you." Her words struck a chord deep within him. For weeks he had been consumed by guilt and fear, convinced that he deserved whatever punishment came his way. But hearing Clara defend him, not out of obligation, but because she genuinely believed in him, ignited a spark of defiance. He couldn't give up now, not when so much was at stake. Determined to fight back, Ethan and Clara dove headfirst into preparing for the trial. They spent countless hours combing through old contracts, emails, and financial records, searching for evidence to disprove Greg's claims. It was tedious work, often frustrating, but Clara remained steadfast by Ethan's side. Her unwavering support gave him the strength to keep going, even on days when hope felt impossibly far away. One breakthrough came unexpectedly during a late-night research session. Clara stumbled upon an email exchange between Ethan and Greg from years ago, detailing their agreement to split profits equally after selling their joint venture. The document directly contradicted Greg's accusation that Ethan had embezzled funds. Excited, she rushed to show Ethan. "This could be it," she exclaimed, waving the printed email. "Proof that you didn't steal from him." Ethan scanned the document, his heart racing. "You're right," he said, his voice filled with cautious optimism. "This changes everything." With their attorney's guidance, they submitted the evidence to the court, confident it would exonerate Ethan. But while the discovery was a turning point, the road ahead remained uncertain. Greg wasn't backing down, determined to drag the case out as long as possible. The stress took its toll on both Ethan and Clara, testing their resilience in ways neither had anticipated. As the trial approached, tensions reached a boiling point. News outlets camped outside Ethan's estate, hounding him for statements. Anonymous trolls flooded social media with hateful comments, attacking not only Ethan but also Clara for standing by him. Some accused her of being a gold digger, others claimed she was manipulating him for personal gain. The negativity became overwhelming, leaving Clara questioning whether staying involved was worth the cost. "I don't want you to get hurt," Ethan told her one evening, his voice heavy with concern. "If you need to step back, I'll understand." Clara shook her head fiercely. "No, I'm not going anywhere. You've stood by me through everything. I'm not abandoning you now. Besides," she added with a small smile, "who else will remind you to eat and sleep?" Her determination melted away some of Ethan's lingering doubts. He realized then that Clara wasn't just his assistant or friend. She was his partner in every sense of the word. Together, they faced each challenge head-on, refusing to let fear dictate their actions. When the day of the trial finally arrived, Ethan walked into the courtroom feeling a mix of nerves and resolve. Clara sat in the front row, her presence a comforting anchor amidst the chaos. As the proceedings unfolded, Greg's lawyer painted a damning picture of Ethan, portraying him as greedy and untrustworthy. But Ethan's attorney countered with irrefutable evidence. including the email Clara had discovered, systematically dismantling Greg's case. Throughout the trial, Ethan maintained his composure, speaking honestly about his past mistakes and the steps he had taken to make amends. His testimony resonated with the judge and jury, humanizing him in a way the media never had. By the end of the week, the verdict was clear. Ethan was innocent of all charges. The accusations against him were dismissed, and Greg was ordered to pay damages for defamation. Relief washed over Ethan as he stepped out of the courthouse, greeted by cheers from supporters who had rallied behind him. Reporters shouted questions, but this time the tone was different, admiring rather than accusatory. For the first time in months, Ethan allowed himself to breathe freely. That night, Ethan hosted a small celebration at his estate, inviting Clara, Ben, and a few close friends who had stood by him throughout the ordeal. As they raised glasses of champagne to toast his victory, Ethan turned to Clara, his expression soft and grateful. "You saved me," he said simply, "not just with the evidence, but with your belief in me. I wouldn't have made it through this without you." Clara smiled, her cheeks flushing slightly. "We did it together," she replied. "And besides, you've done more for me than I could ever repay." Their eyes met, and for a moment the room seemed to fade away. All the unspoken feelings, the quiet moments of connection, bubbled to the surface. Neither of them moved, caught in the magnetic pull of emotions they had resisted for so long. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Clara, there's something I need to say." Before he could continue, Ben bounded into the room, interrupting the moment with youthful energy. Laughing, Ethan and Clara shared a knowing glance, silently agreeing to revisit the conversation later. For now, they were content to bask in the joy of triumph, surrounded by the people who mattered most. Little did they know, the journey ahead would bring even greater challenges and opportunities to deepen the bond they had forged. But for tonight, they celebrated not just victory, but the power of redemption, friendship, and the courage to face the past head-on. The aftermath of the trial brought a sense of calm that Ethan hadn't felt in years. The accusations against him had been proven false, and Greg Hargrove's reputation was left in tatters. While some remnants of the scandal lingered in gossip circles, most people began to see Ethan for who he truly was now, a man who had faced his mistakes, made amends, and emerged stronger. The foundation, New Beginnings, continued to thrive, earning praise from community leaders and beneficiaries alike. It became a beacon of hope for struggling families, just as Clara had envisioned. But despite the outward success, something inside Ethan shifted. Winning the trial wasn't just about clearing his name, it was about reclaiming his life. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future beyond work, beyond redemption. He thought about Clara often, not just as the woman who had stood by him, but as someone who had become an integral part of his world. Her laughter brightened his days, her wisdom guided his decisions, and her kindness reminded him of what truly mattered. Yet every time he considered confessing his feelings, doubt crept in. What if she didn't feel the same way? What if admitting his emotions complicated things between them? Clara, too, wrestled with similar thoughts. She admired Ethan deeply, not just for his resilience, but for the person he had become. Over the months, their bond had grown stronger, transcending professional boundaries. There were moments when their eyes met across a room or their hands brushed accidentally, sending sparks of awareness through both of them. Still, neither dared to cross the line, afraid of jeopardizing the delicate balance they had built. One crisp autumn evening, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze, Ethan invited Clara to join him for a walk on the hill overlooking the town. It was a place he often visited alone to reflect, but tonight he wanted her company. They strolled side by side, the silence between them comfortable yet charged with unspoken words. "Do you ever think about where we started?" Ethan asked suddenly, breaking the quiet. "That rainy night when you climbed into my car by mistake?" Clara chuckled softly, glancing at him. "How could I forget? I thought you'd call the police." "I almost did," Ethan admitted with a grin. "But then I realized maybe it wasn't a mistake at all." Her breath caught at the intensity in his voice. "What do you mean?" Ethan stopped walking, turning to face her. His gaze was steady, searching hers for answers before he spoke. Clara, I've spent my whole life chasing success, trying to prove myself to the world. But none of it meant anything until I met you. You showed me how to be better, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. And somewhere along the way, he hesitated, his voice softening. I fell in love with you. Clara's heart skipped a beat. She stared at him, stunned by the raw honesty in his confession. Part of her had always suspected his feelings, but hearing them aloud sent a rush of warmth through her chest. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, Ethan, you don't have to say anything, he said quickly, misinterpreting her silence. I just needed you to know how I feel. If you don't feel the same way, I'll understand. But I couldn't keep pretending. I love you too, Clara interrupted, her voice trembling. I have for a long time. Relief washed over Ethan's face, followed by a smile so genuine it lit up the twilight around them. Without another word, he reached for her hand, pulling her close. Their lips met in a kiss that was tender yet full of promise, a culmination of everything they had shared and endured together. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and Clara embraced their relationship openly, no longer hiding behind cautious professionalism. To everyone who knew them, it seemed natural, as if they had always been meant to be together. Ben, Clara's younger brother, teased them playfully, calling Ethan his new big brother. Even Joe, the gruff owner of the diner where Clara used to work, gave them his blessing, saying, "About time you two figured it out." Their partnership extended beyond romance. They continued working together to grow New Beginnings, expanding its reach to neighboring towns. Clara graduated top of her class from the community college and secured a nursing internship at the local hospital, fulfilling her dream of helping others. Meanwhile, Ethan focused on mentoring young entrepreneurs, teaching them the importance of integrity and compassion in business. As the years passed, Ethan and Clara's love only deepened. They married in a small ceremony surrounded by family and friends, exchanging vows under the same hill where Ethan had confessed his feelings. The reception was held at his estate, transformed into a warm, inviting space filled with laughter and joy. It was a celebration not just of their union, but of the journey that had brought them together. Ben thrived under their care, excelling in school and developing a passion for robotics. With Ethan's support, he attended a prestigious tech program, following in his sister's footsteps of dreaming big. Together, the three of them formed a family bound by love, trust, and shared dreams. Looking back on their lives, Ethan and Clara marveled at how fate had intertwined their paths. A simple mistake, one wrong car on a rainy night, had led to a story of redemption, transformation, and love. They often joked that if Clara had chosen the right vehicle that evening, they might never have met. But deep down, they believed it wasn't chance at all. It was destiny. Their legacy stretched far beyond themselves. Through New Beginnings, they touched countless lives, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness could create ripples of change. And in each other, they found not just partners but soulmates, two imperfect people who had chosen to build something extraordinary together. Underneath the stars, hand in hand, Ethan and Clara often reflected on their journey. Life hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Every challenge, every triumph had led them here, to a place of love, purpose, and endless possibilities. As they stood together, gazing at the town below, they knew one thing for certain. Their story was just beginning.